All right, good evening, everybody. Thanks for coming to another focus discussion. Yeah, so today, as you know, we have Jimmy Stewart teaching us on persistent offenses, which, given the year's theme, is a great topic because it's one that's a difficult criteria, as I'm sure you're going to hear from Jimmy. It's not set in stone, and it requires introspection, retrospection, and a good read on the game. And Jimmy's an accomplished referee with plenty of years under his belt, and likewise as an instructor. But I will let him do his own introduction and just point out that he is the most remote instructor we have had to date, and that's fun to see. So thank you very much, Jimmy. We're happy to have you.
All right. Well, thanks for the invite. I don't need to give a whole long introduction because I know everybody that's on here, I think. Y'all have been around, some of you as long as I have. And when Lewis said, yeah, quite accomplished, he was being very nice by saying, yes, I'm old and I've been around the block once or twice. I've been thankful that Lewis has kept me on the distribution for what's going on with Team 3. You know, I am in a remote part of the world. I enjoy it down here. I really do. But for the most part, actually about 99% of all the info that I get and being kept up to speed with what's going on in the soccer world these days is really thanks to all the friends and folks that I have back in California, particularly, you know, the Section 10 folks, but also 111, because a lot of folks there that I've met. So we exchanged a couple of emails back and forth. He said, would you be willing to do something? I said, yeah. I asked him, all right, so what is the theme for this year? And he said, was that a good idea? Well, you know, immediately thinking about the stuff that I've had the opportunity to present and teach in the different courses, you know, something along the lines of persistent infringement, you know, now we call it persistent offenses, came to mind, and I went to work on this a little bit. I also asked him a little bit about what's the target audience, what's the experience level I could expect. What I didn't expect is what I ended up with tonight. You know, I joked earlier, you know, with the experience and looking at all the battle and what I'd like to do is kind of change a little bit about what my delivery was going to be and make this more of a discussion. Because everyone I've got that are national referees or have attended the national referee course have seen this presentation in some form over the years. Those of us that have been around for a while know that it has morphed significantly. The way the national referee course has morphed and changed over time, you know, to adjust with the way the laws are changing and the way that presentations have been altered or changed, whether it's directed by AYSO guidance from USSF, or the additional guidance that we get from whether it be FIFA or the IFAB. So if y'all are good with that, some of the stuff that I had planned to really reinforce and dig into a little bit, I'd like to open it up more as a discussion and an offering of your experiences and your contributions rather than sitting here listening to me flap my gums. So is everybody okay with that?
Sounds good.
Sure.
Yeah, sounds good.
Yeah,
all right, so what I'd like to do is kick this off, like I said, what I started with. Let me get this thing to kick the notes back up for me. There we go. Like I said, to fit the spirit of was that a good idea, like I said, persistent infringement came to mind. I know that all of us have seen it, whether we've dealt with it on the field, whether we've recognized and dealt with it on the field, or maybe watching other games, whether it be at the youth level, club level, professional level, international level. And you're going to see some of the videos that I had tonight, or some of them that some of you have seen, but I think they're pretty good at pointing out some of the key things that we need to recognize when it comes to identifying and dealing with persistent infringement. The other thing that I told Lewis or communicated to him with is you're going to see a smattering of references in here that are going to say persistent infringement or persistently infringing the laws. Just because that cautionable offense now says persistent offense or offenses doesn't change the intent of that misconduct, that part of the law. It just matches up, as you're all aware, with the way the wording has changed over the last, 3 or 4 years, okay? One of the other things I was thinking about from a presentation standpoint is that persistent infringement, does it only happen at the upper levels, or do we see it at under 10 or 10U? Okay, don't everybody go quiet on me. Just because I'm not in the classroom with you and I can't throw stuff at you, doesn't mean I'm not going to ask you questions, all right?
I would say yes, we see it at 10U and even under, but there we certainly, or at least I certainly don't card it, and it's more a discussion with the player as to what his actions are and how it's affecting the game.
Okay, that's a good canned answer. I like that one. What is the cause of it when we see it in 8, 9, 10, 11, 12-year-olds? For the most part.
It's usually inexperience or clumsiness. They don't have the skills.
Okay. Yeah, what I would characterize also, Miller, is also, particularly for younger players, is overexuberance. Can also play a factor in there. And at that point, that's where we use our good looks and our charming personalities, like you said, to talk to these kids and help teach them that that's not what they need to be doing. When we take a look at what the laws of the game tell us, straight out of the law book, and you guys know that I don't read slides, okay? Not when I'm doing a presentation or a class. But what I planned on talking about here from a history perspective, is that 2016 is where we first saw inclusion of that phrase, no specific number or pattern of offenses, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Before then, all we had was what? What was the guidance that we had to interpret and guide us for persistent infringement? Now, SSF, okay, the advice to referees, okay, that's what we had to go by. That told us things to consider, what to look for, and if I remember correctly, it gave us some information and things to think about as to if we don't do the right things up front, this is what may happen as we go down the road, okay? One of the things I was looking up also, and I looked at one of the training papers from USSF here earlier in the week. Not only did they spell out no specific number of pattern or fouls constitutes, persistent infringement or repeatedly, but it doesn't require that it be the same offense also. And I'm sure that's something that all of us that are on this meeting tonight are aware of. Okay. So what I had wanted to do was, talk a little bit about being alert to persistent infringement. One of the other things I read in one of the papers is that, and this was from another USSF paper, is that one of the things that referees are not good at, or they fail more often than they do at other things in terms of, recognizing fouls and misconduct, is particularly persistently infringing the laws. For whatever reason, that seems to be a weakness for some referees, that it just doesn't seem to sink in. And we're going to see that in one of the videos from folks that referee at a much higher level than we do. Okay. So bear with me as I'm trying to tailor this up as we move along for a different audience. What we were going to talk about here as part of the presentation is what is the magical number? What is the threshold? So based upon your experience, I want to ask, what number starts to make the hair stand up on the back of your neck?
So I'm gonna say I'm gonna watch the second foul, and I need to watch the reactions to the second foul to see how they're dealing with it. and to see if there's type of intent. And that's where my radar screen starts climbing pretty quick.
Okay. What about others?
I think it depends what the timing between the fouls is. If someone commits 2 fouls within 30 seconds, that's going to catch my eye pretty quickly. But 2 fouls with 30 minutes in between probably won't. And at that point, I'm probably not going to start thinking till someone says, hey, that's number 4. And then keep a closer eye. But I think the timing in between fouls is a biggie for me.
Okay. Anybody
I
else?
would agree. I would say I'd give it maybe 5 minutes or so. If I see 2 fouls and I see that the player hasn't calmed down or become less aggressive after the first one, then the second one is a repeat, I would almost always talk to the player, not take any action against them, not stop the game, but talk to them to make sure they're aware that I know that was 2 fouls.
Okay. Anyone else?
I agree with the timing as far as between the fouls, but also I think it can be a larger time between the two depending on the foul itself. If it's something that I see the player using as a tactic repeatedly, even if it's spaced in time, that'll catch my attention. And on the second one, and then the third one, if he's doing it again, I'll probably consider that persistent infringement.
Okay.
One of the things I want to mention is we talk about offenses. It doesn't have to be particularly a foul, right?
Correct. That's part of the language changes that have evolved over the years. And we've seen that even before the IFAB took over publishing the laws of the game for a number of reasons. And I think we all recognize some of it has to do with languages. Some of it has to do with the nature of play. And then I'm not telling you anything that all of you don't know, but the laws of the game are meant for professionals and internationals. And we're stuck dealing with it at our level. So those are the answers that I expected. And really what I was trying to evoke, and I think we got it, was different viewpoints with different caveats, if you will, a little bit, different considerations, i.e. The timing between the fouls, as I believe Alex brought up. I think it was Chris that mentioned that, you know what, the nature or the type of foul, and I've got a slide later on that, you know, was meant to be in here for reinforcement or wrap up. But what, you know, is it a tactical foul or both of them? Yeah, they may be 20 minutes apart, 30 minutes apart, but were they tactical fouls breaking up promising attacks, for example? Okay, as opposed to the other end of the spectrum, you know, if it's spread out over 40, 50 minutes and there, you know, there are 3 fouls that didn't amount to much and nobody's getting the fouls in an uproar, then that's the other end of the spectrum. So, is everybody okay with that?
Yep.
All right, so I'm going to take that. I'm going to take the deafening silence as a final agreement. Okay. I've got a video here, and what I want to do is I want to play this thing through. Some of us have been watching soccer long enough. We're going to recognize the player involved and everything else like that. But what I want to do is just play through the whole thing. I'm not going to say anything while it's playing. One of the things that Lewis coached me through last night when we did a trial run is when you've got a video playing with music or talking going on, then my voice is not going to come through or it's going to dampen the other one. So what I'd like to do is go ahead and play it, take a look at it, and then we'll talk a little bit about it afterwards.
Your new mail is
Okay, so to start off with, isn't it always heartwarming to see how the players agree with the referee's decisions? You know, especially at the end. All right, so tell me what was going on with this one. Anybody know anything about this particular player and the referee? Nobody?
Well, Georgie Haji was a pretty well-known enforcer and quite skilled. And, Paul Ince was, a lot of the English attacking force at that time. So these were very definitely tactical fouls.
That's absolutely correct. And Haji's reputation, he played for Romania, but his reputation also extended to his club playing days as well. And Bob's absolutely right. And this is a case, where the referee has done his homework. He knows what to expect. He knows what to look for out there. And he absolutely knew what he was seeing. And in this case, 2 fouls, persistent infringement. He's shown the yellow card. And believe it or not, the famous Haji behaved himself for the rest of the match. Now, from the perspective of watching that at the professional and international level, those referees have a better opportunity to get, film footage and all kinds of training and all, and know the players that they're refereeing. And this particular referee has probably refereed Haji before, either at the professional or international level, so he's got that in his back pocket. Now, do we have that luxury afforded to us?
Nope. Nope, we don't have it.
Okay, so I've gotten a note. Anybody want to say we have some of that luxury afforded or no?
The only time in a tournament where you have seen a particular team play before, you have some pre-knowledge before you get in the end rounds. But when you just get into and see the first, of the day, then you usually don't have any information before that.
And I would agree. Yeah.
If we're over the third one.
Yeah, I was just a leapfrog on top of that. I would agree with that. You don't have a lot of intel on the teams going into it unless you get it from fellow referees or if you're doing, league play. Yeah, you just don't have a lot.
Yeah, I would agree during league play. You can, during, a 10-week season, you can pick up a lot of tendencies and probably after the second half of the league, you pretty much know who's going to do what.
Every time I referee, I always talk. If I'm the referee, I will talk to my assistant referees before the match and ask if they got any information on these teams. Did they ref them last week, or have they seen them play? So, gather information.
I think if you play in a league and your region is pretty big, and you see the number of same teams every weekend, then you get a pretty good idea. But certainly not in the beginning of the season when they just formed new teams. You would go in basically without intelligence. You have to figure out in the first few games how the team is behaving. And they're not always consistent because some are learning, some are doing strange things in the beginning, and then they don't do anything in the beginning and they do something during the season. So it's kind of always surprising, how it develops during the season.
I like all the answers. Good experience there. One thing I'm going to ask for you to think about is this, particularly with, if you've got a big enough region, which at least when I left, our regions in Area E were not big enough to have multiple teams. We played, inter-area play. But given that, a lot of these players, by the time we get to 16U and 18U, a lot of us have been seeing these kids play for years. So there is another, at least for league play, and maybe when you get into, your playoff stuff for league teams, and even some of your all-star teams, there's a little bit of history there that you should have been able to develop over time. Will they change from year to year? A little bit, but you know what? Some of the tendencies are going to remain the same as they grow up. Okay, so just kind of keep that in the back of your mind as well. Any other comments about Haji and 2 fouls, 2 offenses being enough to warrant being shown the yellow card?
I think in this case that you showed the video, the fouls were pretty obvious. But in a lot of cases in AYSO, it's not always clear if the referee recognizes the foul as such. And that's, I think, is where the trouble starts, when he lets things go, because he figures, is that really a foul? Is that not a foul? And then on top of that, he has to consider, okay, is it a persistent offense if he isn't even sure if he's deciding if it's an offense? And that's what I figure out with a lot of beginning referees that have this problem, that they don't know exactly to decide if it's an offense, especially when it's the first season for them.
Okay, so what I'm hearing there is kind of a combination of recognizing fouls and misconduct, and then how that factors into persistent infringement or persistent offenses is the way it'd be written up. Is that a fair characterization, Anton?
Yes.
Okay. All right, so let's talk a little bit about the flip side of it. And this is where it's not one player persistently infringing the laws, but you have multiple players involved in a pattern of misconduct. Pretty much, I'm just going to throw it out there, as targeting key player in the opposing team. We all know that happens, okay? We're not going to see that with the 10s. You'll see that at the 18s, and we see that at the professional and international level. So my question for everybody is if we allow that to happen, what are some of the possible outcomes? What are we going to see from some of the players on the field?
Frustration.
Frustration, yes,
Okay.
and a retaliation.
Okay, frustration, and it manifests itself. What else might we say?
You might see an injured player.
Yeah.
Okay. Anything else?
Could be a game changer.
Could be.
Yeah.
So let me throw out a couple of things to think about. How many of y'all watched the Women's World Cup in 1999? It's a long time ago, I get it.
It's a long time ago.
Yeah, come on, I was even at the Rose Bowl for the final. Come on, folks.
I did.
Oh, I
I
saw
think
that.
Alex was 3 at the time.
Yeah.
I have to say a fun fact. My little sister Barbara Alvarez played for the Mexican national team in the World Cup that year. She didn't make it on the field, but she was on the bench.
Cool. All right. So anybody who remembers that Women's World Cup, anybody remember? And I think it was a pool play game. The game between the U.S. and Nigeria. Okay. Well, let me describe it a little bit, and I will start off by saying that probably about halfway through the match, my wife was ready to pull me off the ceiling. Okay. If you watch Women's World Cup, and even the men for that matter, Nigeria plays a pretty tough physical game. They take no prisoners. They foul hard, they foul often, and there was nothing different in this game against the U.S. In this particular case, avoiding injury is late, about halfway, maybe a little bit more through the second half. The coach for the U.S., Tony Chico, pulls Mia Hamm out of the game because she was just getting a dog snot hammered out of her. I mean, fouled, time after time after time, and he pulled her out to avoid getting her injured. So here's a case where when that kind of activity is allowed to persist and continue, then yes, you risk injury, or in this case, from the professional international level, you're pulling a player off the field that people pay good money to come watch play. How does
True.
that correlate to players in the games that we would referee? Anybody?
Well, the answer to that is, yeah, we still have players in our games that are definitely targeted. Most teams have one or two players that are really the focus of their attack, and quite often you will see those. Well, a lot of the fouls are going to be happening around those players, and you know, the idea is to take them out of their game.
Yes, I have to agree with that, especially in the 14 to 16 levels. I've seen it a lot.
One downside we have with AOISO, if we're following standard AOISO substitution policies, the coach doesn't have as much freedom to take a player off. And that might lead to that player maybe getting injured or maybe retaliating,
Yes.
since the coach can't pull them out when they want to calm them down.
What we usually see is the coach usually blows up before the player sometimes blows up. And then the coach gets, the card or whatever. I mean, he's trying to protect his player, but the referee doesn't get it maybe, and then, he's punishing the coach.
Yeah, and Cindy, I really like your comment. I'm gonna be honest with you. I hadn't thought about that with the substitution opportunities, but that's definitely a good point. So let's talk about the guy that we see in 5 pictures on the screen right now. Men's World Cup in 1990.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm sure everybody here knows that Maradona is one of the key players. Okay? Even despite his hand of God incident in another World Cup. Very talented. You take him out of the game, you're going to take Argentina out of the game. And in this particular incident, or this particular match, he didn't get protected. And what did he do? He retaliated and got sent off.
Yeah.
So when he retaliates and gets sent off, is that send off justified?
You
I
see,
mean, if he, if it's violent conduct, he punches, the last guy that took him out. Is that reason for a send off?
Yes.
yeah, the referee has no choice if he follows the laws of the game, right? The thing with that
Okay,
is
so let me-
targeting of is could he have prevented get to that point?
Okay, there you go. When something like that happens, it's incumbent upon us and our referees to figure out, did I have a role in that happening? Did justice get served? Yes, I followed the laws of the game to the letter of the law, but was that the right thing to do? Okay. We all know players will take matters into their own hands if we don't protect them. And then, the last thing I was going to bring up is a possible result when we allow what I was taught growing up as a referee, rotational fouling. It's really unsporting behavior in this case. Different terms that we've all heard as sort of come up. Some players, they'll just absolutely shut down and become, non-existent in the match. They're kind of, well, okay, I'm done. So things that we don't want to have happen. So I've got another video to watch. And I'm going to tie this to a comment that I made with this previous slide. There's a pattern developing here. So what I'm going to do is ask you to pay attention to these things. When I say time of the match, the time in the match when the foul or the incident occurred. The one disclaimer that I didn't put up, and I'm sure you're aware of this, is we're not trying to judge, is this a foul? Is it careless, reckless, excessive force? They're all fouls, okay? Just plain and simple. But let's take a look at the other things that we're talking about after that.
Goes after him. Here's a key. The turn lost it. Turn away. Key.
when you were talking to him before the game, wants to have McMillan coming back into the midfield and the defense to collect the ball. So far, that's working in their favor. The reason that's important for Atlanta is it pulls her out of the offense, and we know how the coach is going to the ball. So that is a point for Atlanta. She did touch it. It looked like she had left it. How it is.
Has some bumps up. 10 minutes of play. We talked about the physicalness of these two teams, and they're your top four leaders in terms of fouls committed in the league. Not just for these two teams, top four in the league. And the last time these two clubs met, 22 fouls. Finally got a yellow card, followed at the WSA's first red card. Right now, it's not good because Mercy and TJ's been spoken to. That's the third time. Down the sideline. There's a key foul.
Yeah, again, don't you just love the player's acceptance of a foul call, particularly on the last one. So questions here, folks. How many fouls were there?
4.
Okay, so we saw 4 of them in the first half. Okay. What was noticeable about the timing?
Early.
Oh, the 6:20.
Early and what else?
3:53.
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear the last one.
Oh, you mean the minutes in the match?
Yeah, what was, roughly the time?
The first 3 ones were in the beginning of the match, like I think 6:20, 7:46, 8:53, and then the last one was at 41, 42. So it appears to be the beginning of the match already happening, right?
Okay. So these 3 right here, that's 2 minutes and 34 seconds. I saw a couple of comments earlier when I asked about the number of fouls and what trips your radar. What about this time span of 2.5 minutes? Shouldn't that make the hair stand up on the back of your head pretty doggone quick?
Well, as you noticed in the video, they also displayed that this particular player 19 had a big record already in the tournament, right?
Well, actually, she's playing on one of the 2 teams that are league leaders. In this particular case, she wasn't in the top 4, which quite honestly surprises me. And I'll talk about that in a minute.
But
Key point here is talking about timing.
Yeah, you see that almost in the minutes, right?
Okay. So here's the other thing. I talked about it earlier when we talked about Hodgie, and Bob brought it up also. He's an enforcer. The referee knew about this. Okay. Now, what I find, and here's where I'm going to go into my smart aleck mode for just a minute. I find it very ironic that her first name is Mercy for what she does. Okay. Again, she's a Nigerian soccer player. She's one of the ones that hammered the crap out of Mia Hamm in the World Cup. So there's a pattern going here. Now, folks, you know that I'm not bagging on the referee. This guy's refereeing at a level that I'll never achieve. However, we're using this film here to illustrate something that, one, he should know something about her. Okay? Particularly working within, at that time, there's the WUSA. And talking to other referees. She's got a pattern or a history. Now, the other thing I want to ask before I go to the next question, the third foul at 8:53, what happened after the whistle was blown? What do you think, Alex? Did you catch something?
There was a lot of angry arguing there.
I would say to be honest, the video was fuzzy on my end, so I did not catch it.
So the white actually started challenging back to the player that created the offense.
Yeah. There you go. Getting a little bit upset about things. And to me, and if you don't agree with me, say, Jimmy, I think you ought to be considering something else. But that right there would have triggered, at least for me, if the referee had not already been talking to her, which the announcer said something to her after the second foul, then, it's probably about time to take some action and put a stop to stuff. Anybody disagree with that?
No, I think, Jimmy, you're right. I think especially in youth games, you see that often, that the players try to tell you something to the referee, that they are getting frustrated. And this was kind of the same thing here, where you see this white player getting, up, knowing that's going to happen again. And the referee, I don't know, is going to react on it or not. But I think in our youth games, definitely we should keep our, ears open and that kind of thing, and our eyes open for that kind of reaction.
So Jimmy, one of the points I was going to make, and I'm reflecting on my season this year, and it was mostly 19U and 23U. At this level, the players are pretty spun up because they're very intense. They love the sport. They're very tactical. They're very challenging. So when something happens like that, their radars are up real quick too. And so as a referee, we have to acknowledge that. And at that second fall, it would have been a really good discussion time to settle that player down and say, okay, this is repeated. This is what I'm seeing, and to let those players on the attacking team know that, hey, we've had a conversation. I see it, and that's how I'm managing it, right? Because that player can get out of control pretty quick.
Absolutely. All right, so we've already talked about this a little bit. There were comments that were made when I asked about, is it 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 fouls? You already started answering, assimilating the other factors that we consider. So I'm really not going to belabor, this particular slide here. Come on now, hold on just a second. There we go. So as we said before, we're not giving a number. We got to figure it out as we go along. We've got to read the game, got to understand what's being presented in front of us, and remember that all of this is in the opinion of the referee. I'm not going to talk about anybody's license plate, but it's in the opinion of the referee. Okay. So the numbers that get presented as part of this slide, particularly when we teach the National Referee course, is when we talk about these kinds of numbers, whether it's 60 fouls, we realistically understand that that's not going to happen. Because if we had that many fouls, we're going to have a hell of a lot more problems than just dealing with, the little stuff. But the idea is to understand what it does to break down the flow of the game. The other part of it is the enjoyment of the game, not only for the players, but for the spectators as well. All right, so I've got one more video. This is one that some of you may, it's not as far back as 1999, or 1990, but it goes back just a little bit. Again, I'm going to let this thing play through, and then we'll talk about it after.
NASL broadcast booth. There's another foul on Mastroeni. Tackled from behind dangerously by McKinley, and that is a yellow card in the 14th minutes. And Donovan, usually well-mannered Donovan, gets upset.
Yeah, Ivan McKinley known to get in a little bit. That's a terrible tackle from behind, and then he taunts him a little bit after it. And if you're a team and you're coming in and you're playing against the San Jose Earthquakes, and you see what Landon Donovan is doing, that's what you're going to try to do to Landon Donovan. He's got to get used to it. He's handled himself brilliantly up to this.
Gamosa, Sunday they were on the field together. In Foxborough, there's a possible foul coming. Play on.
He's trying to win the ball. That's just a big pop shot. There's got to be discipline on something like that. Maybe once an accident. A player of his caliber, that's not an accident. Yeah, and this is where you're, up here you're thinking, man, he's got it.
Says something to Donovan. Isn't it interesting? In MLS, when most most of the time, Landon Donovan's the great savior, and when you're playing against him, he's just a pain in the butt.
It's a pretty cheap foul by Rooney here. Most of those fouls have been on Landon Donovan. He's been the recipient of like a good 8 and 8 hard fouls.
So I like the justification for the fouls because the opponent is a pain in the butt. Okay. Comments. What did we say?
Did we see about 6 to 8 fouls against Donovan in the same game? The star player?
So okay, go ahead. I'm listening.
I didn't notice the referee do much of anything about it.
But he showed a card on the second foul, Chris.
Second one. That doesn't mean he has to stop showing the card as the fouls continue.
But what did
team,
he the
the
second
team
foul?
changed tactics and had other players start doing the fouls, so it was the whole team targeting him.
Right.
It's still persistent fouling against a player. And
Yes.
I would think you could card the player for that, the person that committed the foul, even if it's his first foul.
Yes.
Okay, so I would
targeting.
Chris, I agree that it's persistent fouling against that player who's being targeted. But what would the justification be when we write the misconduct report?
The justification would be persistent fouling, and I would hope that the referee, in seeing that there's a team effort to foul this player, had talked to the player in charge of his team and warned him about what's going to happen if this continues, and then if it continues, card the player for persistent fouling.
Okay, anybody want to help Chris out a little bit and carry this conversation along?
When I follow this, you said you would talk to a player. Is it a player in particular? Because we notice now that the team effort is here happening, right, to foul Donovan.
Yeah, I was trying to say to team captain.
These are captain or to that particular one that fouled the last time.
One technique that I've seen used at the professional level that seems to be effective is after about the third or fourth foul on the same player, the target player, is for the referee to, point to the player, wave with the hands, no more, and make it very clear that the next time that he's targeted, there's probably going to be persistent offenses.
Okay.
Hey, Jimmy.
Yes.
Is this something I wanted to ask you about? Because I'm pretty sure in the old USSF guide to referees, when a player is targeted, the actual misconduct is written up as a USB. And I'm looking through the laws of the game, and I don't think that IFAB calls it out. So I'm assuming we'll still go with USSF's guidance and go with USB, not persistent offenses for targeting. Is that correct?
Anybody else want to chime in on that? Your thoughts?
Well, persistent offense, we say nowadays, doesn't have to be a foul, right? So if the offense in this case is basically a kind of unsporting tactic from a team, we can still say it's persistent offense, no matter which player it is. You just keep, the first player that does it again just gets the card for it.
Well, actually, in the laws of the game, it specifically says a player is cautioned if they are guilty of persistent offenses.
Yes.
It doesn't actually specify targeting by a team, as far as I can find it. That's what I'm asking.
Okay.
It's still an offensive team, right?
Kind of a technicality, but still, I'd like to have it right.
See, in the case of Bob says, if the referee has made, let's say, this gesture to anybody in the other team, say no more to this player, you could actually technically say, you know what, I already warned you, and now the next one that does it is actually showing dissent to me, right? And you can say, okay, now you get a caution for, basically stating that you didn't do that. I
Okay,
want
so
you.
anytime let's go down that path. We have to do this in the confines of what we've been instructed to do and what the actual cautionable offenses are. Now, persistent infringement or persistent offenses, that caution is meant for a player who repeatedly, persistently infringes the laws, yes? But now we're talking about a team, certain number of members, whether it's 5, 6, whatever, are repeatedly targeting a key opponent.
Well, it's actually also a tactical way of doing this, right? That's what they do. It's a tactic.
Right? So that's what they do, but how do we write it up is where I'm going to. What is their behavior?
It's persistent.
It's
Well, it's
persistent.
Okay, Jimmy, I'll bail you out.
I'm looking for a key word. Come on.
Yeah, it's unsporting behavior. Yeah,
Unsporting behavior. Okay.
because if it's the player who just came off the bench and now he's going to commit the first foul, he hasn't committed any persistent offenses. It's just he's doing unsporting behavior because now that player's been targeted. So that's what you write it up.
There you go. And it's a fine distinction. But one of the things is looking at the collective badge level of this meeting tonight, we need to make sure we get those things right and that we write the misconduct reports up correctly. Is it persistent? Is it bad? Yes, no doubt about it. But we want to make sure that we write things up correctly. Okay. Just a couple of other things I want to touch on because we spent some discussion, some good discussion, for which I'm thankful for. Is just to talk about a couple of other things about what influences, a little bit about what we see with persistent infringement. Some of the discussion is obviously going to originate at the professional and international level, but like the games we see, and Miller's talking about working 19s and 23s, it's going to be there as well. The laws of the game are stricter than they have been before. So why is that? Why are there modifications by the IFAB every year to either clarify or take care of something in terms of player behavior?
I think they still want to maintain the attractiveness of the game and reduce, the cheating and the unattractiveness, especially the dangerous part of the game.
Okay, so let me rephrase the question because I'm not getting the answer that I'm looking for, so I must be doing it wrong. Okay. What is it that the players and the teams are doing that are causing changes in the way that the games need to be refereed?
I think the players and the teams are getting smarter, and tactically the stakes are a lot higher too, right? So if it's a UEFA team or if they're in a tournament, right, there's money on the line. That's one thing. Plus, all the players have salaries, and so they're in it. So yeah, I just think it's a win at no stakes type of attitude where we're going to.
Okay. Anything else?
I think there's another side to that coin, and that's the referees are being a little bit more stricter. At least I believe they're being trained to be more stricter on the field in order to protect the players, especially when it comes to carding and injuries that would involve an ankle or a knee or cleats up.
I would agree with that as well. Keep in mind that, like a lot of other professions, same thing happens in this game. Players, they're looking for a way to get an advantage because, at this level, it's all about money. At all levels, it's all about competitiveness and wanting to win. But they're looking for different ways to get an advantage, fair or unfair. So the laws of the game get rewritten. The laws don't get rewritten, they get modified, and additional clarifications get added to it. So that's one of the things that we have to keep in mind and try to understand that when we see revisions from one year to the next, what are they trying to tell us, and what does that mean for the way that we observe and referee the match. Okay. And then some of the obvious things that all of us are aware of is, it's a tactic to slow down the game, and particularly, think about watching. For me, a good example is watch a professional match, and I'm going to use the Barclays Premier League because that's the one I watch most often. When you watch a lesser skilled team that's down the bottom of the table playing somebody's, who's up in the top four, what is that lesser skilled team going to do? They're going to try to make up for their lack of skill and the way that their team plays. And some of that gets manifested in what we see and what we're talking about this evening. All right. I think what I want to do, Lewis, is I'd like to cut off the formal part of the presentation or discussion, rather, at this point. You asked me, let's run it about 45 minutes. A lot of what's left in this module, and I'm sure you're aware of it, deals with a lot of stuff that we've already talked about, and it's kind of a review of what we've already discussed. Any comments, suggestions, anything you would like me to either go over or bring up, or would you like to vote from people?
Yeah, well, I've got a question on the practical side of this, right? We've got these great clips set up for us where we know they're set up for persistent offenses, right? So we're already cued in on that. If I'm being honest, when I'm refereeing, most of the time, to the point when I start thinking about persistent offenses is when the coach or the parent or the player starts saying, "Hey, that's 3, ref," and I'm thinking, "Is that 3? I don't remember if that's 3." There are times when they leap out at you, you get it yourself, but for the most part, it's someone else that clues me in on it. What's an effective way to be ready to track this on the field, along with the dozens of other things you're tracking? How can we have this knowledge, we know the criteria, but how do we use it?
Well, let's hear from everybody else on here. We all know that stuff that works well for some of us, not so well for others, we have to learn to do it. But I'm interested to see what other people do.
So, Lewis, I'll reflect on some of my thoughts this season. So I'm a kinesthetic learner, so I have to do things to remember. I can't just read it and then memorize it. And so what I do is, and I talk about this in terms of how I build a relationship, the expectations of a relationship on the pitch, right? And so the players expect me as a referee to manage the game, really know what's going on at the game, be a neutral official, right? And not give advantage to another team. And so that's part of my job. So when I see that advantage being taken, or I see that hard challenge, I'm immediately going in and creating that opportunity to talk to that player. But that also ingrains it in my mind. Oh yeah, we've already talked before. Oh, we've already talked about this, right? So first of all, it's a control piece, but it's also a, hey, I'm seeing this player's face, I'm seeing the player's number, and they know they're on my radar.
I agree with that. What I wanted to ask Jimmy, in a lot of our teachings, we always take kind of video clips from the adult plays. The problem is if you want to teach something to your referees in the youth games, there are not enough of the video clips that actually shows the referees coming up actual situations in youth games that they should actually relate to.
Okay. So let me ask you on this, and I'll answer the question in just a minute. What I'm interested to see is if anybody else has any feedback based upon Lewis's question.
I mean, to be honest, I think I do what Lewis does. I'm very trusting. So when someone says, "Hey, ref, that's 3," I start to think, it must be right. That must be 3 fouls from that player, and go from there. But yeah, I don't have an actual tracking method. My brain can't handle that much.
I don't have a method of tracking it with all the hundreds of other things going on in the game, but there are sometimes players that stand out And if you see the player do something and then repeat it, and that player is going to stick in your memory more so than other things that have gone on in the game.
I think it's easy. Well, not easier, but I think it's easier, somewhat easier to find that standout player who's aggressive, who you kept an eye on. The really hard part is when you have a tactic from the other coach or from the team to kind of do rotating offenses, where they spread the foul out, and to see that pattern of foul against a good player on the other team. That's the really tough one to kind of keep an eye on. Like, wow, this player just keeps getting fouled. Is this a strategy by that team? That's one that is tough and needs to be caught.
Hey, a technique I use in my games always is anytime I get a chance to talk to my assistant referees at a quarter break in an AYSO game or halftime and get feedback and ask. Maybe they've noticed something I've missed, or they're keeping track of some player being hit. I mean, it kind of falls into this category. It's a broad, sweeping technique, but it fits in with trying to catch persistent infringement.
You kind of dropped out there. Did you say to work with your ARs or to check with your ARs?
Yes, absolutely. Any chance I get, like a halftime, even quarter breaks, or if there's the balls off the field, I'm nearby.
I think that's a great comment and technique, is to what am I missing? Are you noticing something that I'm missing, or are you seeing something that's happening or hearing something? I think that's really useful.
And I totally agree with that. And that's the value of a really great ARs. The thing is, we not always have the luxury to have, experienced ARs all the time, or even have ARs.
But I think a key point that Tim makes there, and I've watched Tim referee and I've worked with him, he is great about relying on his assistant referees as far as he can. The key point is if you've got them, and particularly if they're good, good enough to be working that game and good, then he's offering up an opportunity there. Here's a vantage point. Here's some information that he's going to garner and use to help manage the game. In this case, we're talking about persistent infringement. I wish I had a magical answer to your question, Louis. I've always tried to focus on, who are the key players? Am I seeing something happen over and over again? I know you and Alex both mentioned, well, I hear, the coach say, well, that's 3 fouls, isn't it? And then there's the tough one. Is there any truth to that, or is the coach trying to game you? So there's another little bit of conflict that gets thrown at you at the same time. But I found that what works is try to identify those players, and when you see something, show up a couple times, there must be something going on here. I really need to pay attention. I'm not about to sit here and tell you I always got it right, but that was the technique that I used. So, anybody else have something to offer to answer Lewis's question? Because I would like to answer Anton's question about the clubs. Okay, so if not, Anton, for a lot of or most of the video clips that are available out there for instructional purposes, when you're teaching or presenting a topic like this, it's going to be more of a professionally done presentation, such as a lot of the clips that we used to get from FIFA and from USSF and other sources, that they can take, a full 90-minute match and piece that together to give us something to work with. There's been a concerted effort starting about, I want to say 7 or 8 years ago, give or take a little bit, where USSF started putting together, it was called a Youth Video Clip Project. There's a lot of them there that are good for teaching, is it careless, reckless, excessive force, things like that. But as far as something produced to teach, like what we saw with the WUSA match or the one with Landon Donovan, those things are few and far between for youth matches. So That's kind of part of the reason why they're just not there right now. Other questions, comments, anything at all?
Hey, Jimmy, can I bring up a scenario and ask you guys an opinion?
Okay, so Lewis is the moderator for time. I'm willing to do it as long as you guys are.
Yeah, I think we're good.
Okay.
Okay.
So this takes me back probably 4 or 5 years ago. Section playoffs, and I was given a U12 girls match to do. And I think Santa Barbara was one of the teams, so some of you might have even been watching. I don't know. But, and I can't remember who the offender was, but there was one player who was really good, and she was getting fouled after fouled after fouled. And it's like, damn, you know, like, what am I going to do here? And the coach is yelling at his players to stop fouling this girl because they were giving up really good scoring opportunities because that was happening. And I was really kind of in a conundrum. I didn't really want to display a card at U12 and then just giving some random player a foul because it's not the same player doing the it was almost like targeting, but the coach implied that it wasn't because he was trying to get his players to stop doing it. A really weird situation. So I was just wondering if anybody had any comments on how they would handle an 11-year-old girl game where that's happening, or if any of you were there watching it when it happened to me. You remember? I'd love to hear your comments.
So did the coach, did the players listen to the coach?
Somewhat. This girl got fouled, I don't know, probably 7 times in this game.
So what's running through my mind is who are the influencers on that team? And so the coach is always one of those, but it sounds like he's asked a couple times but they're still fouling. So you kind of rule out the coach for helping you.
Yeah.
I think, and I'm just thinking out loud here, but maybe during one of the quarter breaks, just throwing over to the team and saying, hey, coach, do you mind if we talk to your team together about this? And approach it from hey, I'm not going to, because I know you said you weren't trying to call anyone out on the field and embarrass them because of their age, but maybe doing it that way.
I like that, Alex. I kind of wish I would have done that now. But to me, that sounds like something workable because, you know, there's no point in talking to the captains. This is 10, 11-year-old girls. The captains are it's rotating. It's irrelevant, you know. So talking to the team as a team, that probably is something I should have done. I like that. That sounds like a workable thing to do. Anyone else got an idea?
I think one thing I would want to be aware of is looking at the attitude of the player who's being fouled. At a 12U, if she's that good, probably she's been having this same experience for the past 3 years. And she might be used to it and accepting of it. Or she might be getting frustrated. And I would say I would want to have a good relationship going with her so that she understood that we were trying to, you know, prevent the fouls. But I would, you know, encourage her to stay positive. I would compliment her on her attitude if she was staying positive. And I would make sure that the fouls are being called so she knew, you know, that people were paying attention. But I'd also want to be aware that she's probably experienced this a lot before. And if the other team particularly was unskilled and what was happening was they were just, because they were unskilled, you know, were unable to make the plays that they were trying to make, I'd try to keep that in mind. In addition, I like Alex's comment on trying to deal with the other team as well.
Right. As I remember, the girl, it didn't slow her down, what was happening to her. But I just felt I wasn't doing a good job because I couldn't seem to control it.
Just a quick question. Did you feel like, and Cindy brought up in a comment, maybe unskilled, did you feel like that they were purposeful, you know, deliberately or purposefully fouling that player, or they, you know, there were clumsy challenges? What was your sense of what was going on?
My sense was a lot of clumsy fouls. but not entirely, you know. But
Okay. I'm just trying to understand what you saw or what you felt. That was the reason why I was asking Tim.
it's just that, you know, 12U made it difficult with the whole business of displaying cards, and I mean, we can do it certainly, but we try not to if we can.
Okay. You feel like you had some decent feedback on it?
Yeah, thank you.
Okay. Anybody else? Okay, so Louis, anything else you want to discuss or cover?
Well, I really want to thank you, Jimmy, for taking the time to call in all the way from where you are. I know we can see the clock on your screen. It's 10:12 p.m. Thank you very much for that. Yeah, I think the sun's about to go down here. Yeah, thanks for making a call, and thanks for staying on your toes. This was a different group than we typically have attend these, and I think it yielded a fun conversation. And yeah, it was content that most of us have seen before, but it was definitely a different conversation, especially toward the end. We were able to tailor it. So thank you very much, Jimmy, for your time and for increasing the value of Team 3 right now. We really hope that these focus discussions are doing something for some of the folks, not only keeping Team 3 relevant, but I know when I called up Phil Briggs at the start of this to try to see if he had any instructors to offer up, he said, well, I'm bored staring at the walls. So hopefully this has fixed that for some people. So yeah, thank you very much, Jimmy.
Well, again, thank you for inviting me. I would like to share one more video with y'all if I can. It won't take very long.
Let's have it.
It's a little bit jerky because I've got so much open on the computer. But this was about 3.5, 4 weeks ago. A couple of us went diving. These are all reef tip sharks. One big one is about 5 feet long. This one right here is missing part of its dorsal fin. But my buddy was spearfishing for lungfish. They're very invasive and destructive fish down here for the reefs. And the sharks know when the spear hits the coral that there's food can be available. These guys were swimming probably about circling us about 4 or 5 feet away. Just a wonderful time in the water that day. So this is part of what I get to do living down here in the Caribbean.
Well, I'm a little concerned the sharks weren't wearing masks.
Oh, but I was wearing one. All righty. Well, Louis, again, thank you so much for inviting me. I thank everybody for participating. I hope that I tailored it enough so it'd be a discussion. Like I said, you didn't need to sit there and just listen to me flap my gums. And besides, there are an awful lot of you in this discussion tonight that I've learned an awful lot from over the years. So I hope it worked out.
Jimmy, thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jimmy.
We look forward to seeing everybody.
Thank you, Jimmy.
My pleasure. And if y'all want to ever come down and visit this way, I'll be happy to be a tour guide.
All right, thanks, Jim.
Thanks, Jimmy. Best to live.
We look forward to seeing everyone on June 18th. Phil Briggs is teaching on the law changes. Thank you very much.